So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Nordic Pavilion at COP28. With this event, we are going to launch the new climate strategy of the Nordic Investment Bank. There's a lot of talk here at COP. There are many kinds of announcements, many kinds of pledges and finances at the center. There's a lot of talk about millions, even trillions, which are needed to decarbonize our globe. But how do we make sure that all these pledges and these announcements will not just end up as green wishes, that they will be transformed into the action? How do we make sure that the climate finance is efficient and that it's also anchored with targets? These were the questions that we asked ourselves at the Nordic Investment Bank when we started to prepare and think about our new climate strategy. My name is Jukka Ahonen, Head of Communications at the Nordic Investment Bank, and I will be moderating this panel. In our panel, we have my colleague, Luca De Lorenzo. He's the Head of Sustainability and Mandate. He's actually the only one who will have a presentation at this session. He will launch and present our new climate strategy. Then we have Markus Talborg, who is a student representing the biodiversity framework, youth biodiversity framework. And then we have Noor Amrani from the FL Smith Danish company providing technologies and services for the mining and cement industry. We also should have one other person. That person is Ligia Ramos, who is representing the science-based target initiatives. She's actually somewhere around, so we hope that she will join us. But now, first, I will give the floor to Luca De Lorenzo, who will present our climate strategy.
Thank you, Jukka, and good Sunday morning, everybody. It's a bit of a different Sunday we are having today, but quite an important one, I think. What I'll try to do is briefly use the next 5-10 minutes to present our revised climate strategy. Of course, we are the Nordic Investment Bank, and climate has been one of the main drivers in our investments, in our actions, in our operations. But the time has come where we thought that we needed to step it up a notch, and this is what we are doing today. We are the Nordic international financial institution, so we are owned by the 5 Nordic countries and 3 Baltic states. And effectively, what we do in terms of climate is we support the ambition to become net zero of our member countries. So we invest and we work with our clients and we invest in projects in our economies towards net zero. That's fundamentally what we do. Now, if we take it back a notch a second, the starting point is actually not that bad in our region. So, of course, here we are at COP. Climate is a global challenge, but if we zoom in into the Nordic-Baltic region, actually over the last decades, we have been able to decarbonize over time, over the last decades, primarily thanks to the green energy transition. Now, there is still a lot to do, but the energy sector in our member region is somewhat developing in the right direction. And we as NIB, we have been investing in that sector. That's why over the last 2-3 years, what we have done, we signed up to TCFD in 2019. And what we have done, like a bank should do, we started looking at our portfolio and calculating our financed emissions. And here on the right-hand side, you see the outcome of that exercise. So we actually have only less than 10% of what we classify high risk in terms of climate in our portfolio, right? And if you look, our portfolio looks relatively clean as a starting point, yeah? But then we look at the temperatures in 2023, record year again. Things are not going in the right direction. So is this enough? We don't think so. So the whole point with the new strategy is to step it up a notch, really, okay? Even in our region, and the contribution that our region has globally needs to improve and needs to further decarbonize. So what we are doing today, we are launching our new climate strategy. We are setting very clear commitments. Net zero bank by 2050, that's fully aligned with our member countries. We are setting midterm targets. We are covering 67% of our financed emissions, the most relevant and material sectors. And the idea is, so you could argue, 67, is that enough? We will work further on that. And over the coming years, we will set more targets and increase the coverage of our portfolio. And that's the plan for 2024. Now, what we have done also is we have set these targets on a science-based logic. So today we also have on our panel, Science-Based Target Initiative. Let me be clear, our targets are not validated yet, okay? But the plan is to validate them next year. But we have used the science-based methodology. So we are moving from financial commitments to actually science-based type of commitments. And I think at the bottom here, maybe the last bullet, is the most important element of our strategy. As I said, we have been investing in green for a long time. We will continue to do that. But the realization is that we need to move those sectors that are not moving yet, what we call slow lane sectors, hard to abate sectors. We need to bring the finance where the emissions are and then bring the emissions down. That's really what the next step is for our region and where NIB wants to get involved. So we will engage even more on hard to abate sectors and our clients. And we have, again, on the panel today, a client which we have been working on exactly this direction. And we will also have specific products to do that. Transition finance and sustainability-linked lending. So linking our lending to transition targets of our clients. But also typical of our region is that, yes, the emissions are not that high, but probably because they happen somewhere else. And we have very deep and long supply chains. So Scope 3 and supply chain tracking is something that we will look further in the next years. All of this means, look at the graph on the right-hand side. Now, this is illustrative. Hopefully, actually, we will not have this dent, or it will be lower. But as an illustration, we are not afraid to get our hands dirty and then clean them up. That's the concept of the strategy. So it might be that in the immediate term, we might have an increase of our financed emissions, but then we bring them down. That's the fundamental logic of our strategy. And we have set targets to 2030 exactly to follow that strategy and that logic, okay? So, as I said, we started with oil and gas. We are already not basically invested in oil and gas, and we will maintain that position. There is no reason to get involved in that. No exposure to oil and gas. Power and heat is a big sector in the Nordics, especially the heat. Here it's nice and warm. I flew in yesterday. It was something like -10 in Finland. So, very important sector for our region. It represents over half of our financed emissions as a bank. Our target is an intensity target. We'll bring that down by 50% by 2030 in our portfolio. Then we have the hard-to-abate sectors, cement, steel, and aluminum. We don't have at the moment a lot of exposure there. The idea is to increase the exposure, but to do that only with very well-defined science-based boundaries. So we will play, but we will play within the boundaries that science tells us we can play with. And we will work with our clients to bring them down. But it doesn't stop there, because we also have sectors like capital goods, consumer retail, where the supply chain element becomes particularly important. Now here, we set engagement targets, as SBTi, I think, would call them. So here, the sectors are so varied and the products are so varied that we can't set an intensity or metric for every single business. But what we do is we ask the clients to set their own targets, or even better, ask the clients to then work with their suppliers to set science-based targets. So you have this domino effect where the whole supply chain has science-based targets and tries to clean up to 2030. And finally, we also have a target on real estate. So the built environment, again, very important in our member region. We are already quite efficient, but there is still more to do also there. And don't forget that what we build today will probably be still around in 2050. So very important sector to cover. So you see the logic, right? Oil and gas out, power and heat core, get strong reduction, engage in the hard to abate and in the supply chain and bring those down, and built environment take care of that. That's basically it. I won't spend more time. There is a whole document out there today. It's Sunday, but if you want, read that up. But as usual, these are just papers. So I think the message of COP and the message from me is, yes, read it up, but then act as much as you can. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Luca. And now I see that Ligia has arrived. So please take a seat. Take a seat. And yes, now we move to our panel. So maybe now with Ligia first. Maybe you could explain a little bit, just to give a short description about the SBTi. What is SBTi? And actually, what is it that you are trying to reach?
Sure. And first of all, I'm so sorry I was a bit late. I've been since 8:30 in the wrong pavilion, in the Norway pavilion, but they treated me really well. I got some water, some coffee, so here I am. Sorry for the confusion and for missed the first part of your presentation, Luca, but very happy to be here. So I'm Ligia. I work as a regional lead for Latin America. I'm Brazilian. So I arrived yesterday, like 5 hours ago. I'm still a bit just warming up here, but very happy to be here with you. So in the SBTi, what we do is we work with science. So we are a coalition among 4 international organizations that are the CDP, the UN Global Compact, the WRI, and WWF. And what we do is that we translate the climate science that, for instance, IPCC, the International Energy Agency, develops or gathers into tools, criteria, methods that companies and financial institutions for all over the world can use to understand how much and how fast they need to decarbonize to reach or to support us as the world to limit global warming to 1.5C and to reach the net zero emissions by 2050. And besides offering these criteria, methods, and tools, we also validate the targets. So as Luca was telling us, sharing with us, we have 2 moments. So the first one is when a company or a financial institution commits to the SBTi. So it means that...
And that we have done.
Yeah, exactly. So a company or IFI commit to SBTi, so meaning that they are committing to develop a target within 2 years, aligned with our criteria and method and all, and then they have to submit the targets for validation and start the validation process. So that is the third part, validation process. And then, so the SBTi indicates how much and how fast they need to decarbonize, should be aligned with 1.5C or net zero. It is very credible because it's aligned with science. So it's not how much you can reduce, but how much you need to reduce should be aligned with science. It also validated by us, by a third party that is independent. And our targets are also comparable. So especially for a financial institution, it can be really, really important. So you can have like a cement company from Norway or from Brazil, and you can somehow compare their performance. So I think those are the best benefits we have. And I don't know if you want me to say anything else now.
How many counterparts we have?
Yeah, sure.
We have signed up?
Yeah, so now we have almost 7,000 companies and FIs committed globally. This week, we reached a series of milestones. So we now have 4,000 companies and FIs with targets validated. We also have 500 net zero targets validated. So this means that these companies are the ones with the highest level of ambition. And we have around 250 financial institutions. From this group, 74 have already validated targets. So numbers are growing weekly. Every Thursday, we publicize the new numbers, and I invite you all to follow because every week we have like 40, 50 new commitments.
How can you deal with such a big inflow of, how can you sort of
It's
validate?
not easy at all.
Yeah.
We are expanding our team, also making our criteria tools even more available so that people can understand better what they need to do, easier, quickly. But every week we are hiring like 2-3 new target analysts to be able to process everything we need to do and to scale up the adoption of science-based targets globally.
Okay, Luca will of course submit this strategy and the targets for the validation, but is there anything what you have now looked at on the superficial that what do you think about this idea of getting hands dirty and then wash them?
I think it's what we need, right? We need to be ambitious to align with 1.5C and net zero. And I have two minor comments. One is that we now have a still guidance aligned with 1.5C that we launched like a week ago, not a week, a month ago. So I invite you also to get to know, maybe align your targets with 1.5C. And with regards to the supply chain engagement, we have also launched a new set of guidances for this with training videos, case studies, so it also can be supportive of the work you are doing with the supply chains for the engagement targets.
All right, thank you, Licia. And then maybe I give you some questions to Noor Amrani, representing FL Smith, which is of course one of these hard-to-abate, working in the hard-to-abate sectors. How is your company using the science-based targets?
Yeah, so maybe I'll just shed a little bit more light on the sectors that we are
Maybe you can keep
supporting.
the micro a bit closer. Yes, yes.
Is that okay, right?
Yeah.
So FL Schmidt is a Danish technology provider to two industries, cement and mining. And combined, these two sectors, they represent 10% of global emissions. So that's not insignificant. And 4 years ago now, we have set our sustainability program, Mission Zero, where we committed to develop the solutions for our customers to support them towards zero emission. So develop all the solutions by 2030 so that you can have zero emission cement, and likewise in mining. Cement is 7 to 8% of the global emissions. Then mining is the rest from the 10% that I mentioned. In mining, what we need to understand is it's a very energy intensive and water intensive industry as well. So the focus is on reducing the energy waste from these processes and also the water usage. So just to set a little bit the picture, because these two sectors we can't do without, unfortunately. We need them for the infrastructure, for the renewable energy, for the batteries of the future. So we can't just say we don't want it. We have to find solutions. And we have made a long way from that perspective. Now, coming to your question on the science-based target. So we have our science-based target being validated. And what it encompasses is basically our own emissions of our operations, but that's very, very small. From, if you look at the scope 1, 2, 3 emissions, it's very small. Our own operations is less than 1%. And then we have our scope 3 emissions, which are the significant part from our customers and from our suppliers, also relatively small. So what we have set as a target is for our own operation is to be carbon neutral by 2030. And that's through different means, but for example, investing in renewables. And then I'd like to talk about our suppliers and our customers, because I think that's the interesting part. So as far as our suppliers are concerned, and you mentioned the domino effect, which I really like, is we have set a target of the spend on our suppliers by 2025, so that's a few years from now, needs to be from suppliers that also have a science-based target. And I'm sitting in my office next to the person responsible for the discussions with the suppliers, and I just witnessed those discussions with the suppliers and the ability that we have, or the power of procurement, as I call it, of basically encouraging them to set a science-based target. And also see the happy face of my colleague when she's managed to convince one of our suppliers to set a target. So, you know, the domino effect of the science-based target can be very, very powerful. Then from our customers' perspective, the way we look at it is in terms of economic intensity, so of what we sell, and basically making sure that what we sell is increasingly the solutions that enable our customers in mining and cement to reduce their emissions. And that is basically, we try to achieve that by making sure that the business, the salespeople, they have their own targets as well, KPIs, in terms of, you know, pushing for the solutions, and also investing in R&D that focuses on making sure we achieve our sustainability commitment.
So you said that you are actually working with your suppliers
Yep.
sort of on these science-based targets. What about then financiers? Does it help? Do these targets help you when you are in engagement with the financiers?
Yes, absolutely, and I think we have a very good example from this year, where we have a new shareholder that increased the well, about nearly 15% of our shares, and they've done it because of our sustainability commitment and because it's validated. And also what you highlighted, right? You're not so much into the hard-to-abate sectors, but there is an increasing understanding from the financiers that they cannot ignore, you know, the hard-to-abate, the difficult ones. It's relatively easy to invest in renewables, but actually you also need to go for the hard-to-abate sectors and, you know, the mining industry that will be supplying the minerals for the energy transition.
Yeah, okay. FSB is, of course, engaged with the discussing with suppliers. As a financial institution, of course, our portfolio could consist of different counterparts who are, of course, having the science-based targets. So basically, we have the same engagement sort of target with our stakeholders.
Yeah, and if I can add some reflections, I mean, you say it, Jukka. I mean, I think what we call it domino effect. If you want, you can think about reaching a critical mass within a value chain. We also look very much at value chain thinking. I don't think we're going to transition to sustainability unless we have a value chain approach where we are looking, you know, whether it's cement, whether it's steel, it's materials, e-mobility, whatever you want, and you need to look and fix every piece of the value chain, right? And that we can do as a financier, as you say, because we have clients across the value chain. So as a bank, we can set our own targets and work with clients across the value chain. But then interestingly, you know, within that value chain, one of the clients could work with the suppliers in that value chain, right? So you're building a critical mass using a very established framework, science-based, and suddenly we have all together, collectively, a direction of travel, right? And that's also super powerful from a bank perspective, because then we can see the whole thing transitioning and we can finance it, right? If it's just one piece of the puzzle, it's not going to work, right? Yeah. So that's, I think, the new thinking. That's how we have set the strategy. I think that's how science-based target framework is set up. And FLSmidth and the sustainability-linked loan that we have with them is a prime example of what we want to do more of, basically.
Yeah, one question actually to FLSmidth relating to this. It sounds a little bit theoretical also, the science-based targets, but maybe can you just give one example what your company is doing in concrete terms to reach those targets?
Yeah, so I'll focus on the solutions, right? So I mentioned, for example, that you know, we have a number of solutions to enable the decarbonization of cement, right? So we have developed it's a hard-to-abate sector. The reason for that is that it's not only emissions related to the energy, but the process. And you therefore need to look into how you change the whole recipe of how you make cement in order to get there. And you know that you won't achieve 100% without, for example, carbon capture. But there we have developed a solution, which is a calcined clay, which is basically using alternative method to producing cement, changing a little bit the ingredients. It doesn't get you to 100% greenhouse gas emissions reduction, but it can get you to up to 40% as of today. So making sure that this solution, that we are pushing these solutions with our customers, that we also work with the banks, just try to make sure that we make a case for that, and that these solutions are implemented. And again, the financial institutions have been critical in making sure that the first of these solutions are being implemented. So that's one example, and there are many, many others, but that's, in terms of how you can make an impact on your customer side. Because again, more than 99% of our emissions come from our customers.
Yes, this action is quite important. That's why the next question actually to all of you is that how is the follow-up to these targets? Maybe Luca, you can start. Okay, maybe Licia, yes.
She's been quiet for a while.
Okay, happy to. So, as the SBTi, we validate the targets, so not the strategy of the company on how they will achieve the target. But then what we do is that every year, after a company or an FI has its target validated, it has to also publish its GHG emission inventories, and also their progress against the targets in a public space, so that any and every stakeholder can get the information and follow up. What we do is that we also yearly get this information, summarize and publish in our yearly monitoring report. So we communicate how companies and financial institutions committed and with validated targets are progressing to achieve or not their targets. And also one of our criteria is that every 5 years, this organization has to review the targets and, if needed, resubmit the targets for validation to make sure that the targets are still aligned with the latest science. And we are also inviting them to upscale the ambition of the targets. So start with a net zero with a short-term target and then move to a net zero target. So always making sure that the right ambition is there.
So it's basically transparency and reporting.
Exactly.
Is that if the company tries to wash their hands but they are still dirty, the issue is transparency, that then everyone can see that that's the case.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Luca, follow up.
Yeah, I can maybe bring it one level further. Absolutely, we need to monitor, we track transparency, right? But then you could argue, what happens if some of our clients start missing their targets? Clearly, they're not on track, right? Which could be I think you're doing fine, but could be the case, right? And then as a financier, that becomes interesting, actually. Because, if you wanted to be very, rigorous, you could argue, okay, at that point, you know what? You're not going to see our money anymore. No, you're not delivering according to the promises. Typical banking approach would be, then we don't trust you, and we move on. But I think the conversation is going to be different. I think the conversation needs to remain one of engagement. And for us, it's very much understanding, is this transition and the commitment from the client still a robust and credible one? So that's what we are going to always check as a financier. And we will use the targets and the monitoring and the transparency as an information point to understand that credibility. Of course, if that credibility drops and that trust is not there anymore, then I do think that financiers should depart from certain clients, right? But if the trust is there, then instead we should work together to develop the next technology, the next solution, or push it even more in order to recoup the target that we are missing at the moment, right?
All right, Nor, you have already a bit more experience with the following up. So how do you follow up?
So we're reporting every year on those targets in our sustainability report, and we're progressing well. But so I said, we have this target of making sure that the sale of our equipment, of our solutions, 56% of that is of solutions that actually have an impact in terms of CO2 emissions by 2030. So that's the target. And last year we already achieved 50%. But this is something typically that could be very volatile and change from one year to another, because it might be that one year we sell less of the solutions than another. And that's where, this conversation, you know the direction and you can address this volatility over time, but at the beginning, it is something challenging. And, you need to have these upfront discussions about, okay, well, this year you did really good. I don't know about next year, right? But it's just to say, you need to be able to have that conversation upfront about we're doing good. It might be that next year we're not doing good, but on the long run, we know we'll get there because we have put all the necessary resources behind.
All right, thanks, Nor. Now I would actually like to invite the Markus Talborg, who has been now actively listening to this discussion, to give a sort of a reflection that what do you think about this discussion?
I'll stand here. Yeah, thank you very much. It has been very interesting. I was once told that at a demonstration in Copenhagen, there was some youth who was standing with a sign where it said, "What do we want? A science-based target. When do we want it? After it's been pay-per-viewed." So at that, I really think that this is very great to hear. And I was fascinated about the talk about the trust and the transparency, because that is something that I'll say the youth has as a critique. There's a point that there's a fragment that these science-based targets could be used at greenwashing companies that are actually not delivering. So, and when you're talking about that, there needed to be a trust between the bank and the companies, then there also needs to be a trust between the youth and the companies and the banks, because we have our trust in you right now, and you need to show that that trust is valid to put in you. So how are that you making sure that you're not being used to being greenwashing companies that are actually not developing or giving what they are saying they will, and delivering on these targets? I'll say that's one of the points from the youth. Thanks.
All right, how to avoid greenwashing? Short round.
Again, the transparency, and I mean, for me, the science-based target is really powerful because you have your targets, they are validated, and you need to report on them, and you show the progress. There's no way around that, right? But to the point that you were making, I think it's the trust with the youth is something essential, because we need that. That's the future workforce, and we need that they trust those systems that we put in place, and where we can demonstrate that we are actually progressing, so that we can attract them to come and work with us and make sure that this work is continued and pushed further. So I just want to highlight that this trust with the youth, then maybe is something we need to work on. Also, if there is mistrust from the youth on the science-based target, have a clear conversation about that and address it, so that we can feel confident that this is a tool that is actually really making a difference.
To add something?
Thank you. This is a very good question and very important one. In the SBTi, we recognize it, and we are working now in a project called MRV, probably, so for measuring, reporting, and verification, meaning that companies will have to report to us yearly or bi-yearly, we don't know yet, but how they are progressing. We will have a set of criteria to do so expanding the level of transparency that we have.
Can you put a bit closer?
Oh, sorry. And more than that, I think we also need this kind of multi-stakeholder monitoring process. So by companies, governments, financial institutions, other non-state actors, so that we can have a full, let's say, loop or ways of monitoring this ambition loop.
Lukas.
Maybe very quickly. I think you raise a good point in terms of trust, right? The trust is not only, in the client bank and system. It's also towards other stakeholders, towards society and the youth, right? And to that, I would say, just keep us honest. Keep challenging. If you see things that we do that are not right, say it. And I can promise you that most of the time on our side, if there is that, it's not the intention is not negative, it's sometimes down to knowledge, right, and data, and so on. So I think that's maybe my comment. The second comment would be around the fact that we are getting smarter. I think greenwashing or robustness of the frameworks are stronger in certain areas. I think scope 1 and 2, it's getting there. It's pretty robust also in terms of data and as a bank. Scope 3, which we mentioned, which we want to get into, and supply chains, a bit more challenging. So there it's a little bit more difficult to track and be super scientific about it. That should not stop us from acting in the right direction, right? But again, the main point is keep us honest.
All right, thank you very much. Is there now someone from the audience who would like to challenge us or just comment? Maybe you bring the microphone there.
Thanks a lot. Thank you for this very useful discussion. I represent the board of the bank, so I'm familiar with this presentation. But what I would like to say, 2 points. That from the board members, many of them are from finance ministries, and we look at from the perspective of creating a credible financial markets. And this is part of the big picture that when we are transforming our financial systems into sustainability, we need this kind of work. And it doesn't come easily. You need a lot of competencies and expertise. They don't just appear. We know how difficult it is to get experts. NIB is a small bank, and that's why big hand to the team. And the validation, it was really interesting to hear what you had to say about the validation, because it's part of the credibility. So really appreciate that. So thanks a lot for this very useful event.
All right, thank you. All right, now we talked about any other intervention. No, we talked about greenwashing, but maybe we could also talk about green wishing. So maybe I would like to have a concluding remark. What is your green wish? Maybe we'll start with Nor.
That's a good question. And we are at COP, right? So we put a lot of hopes on what can be the outcome of this COP, because we are at a crossroad in terms of ability to meet the 1.5. But I would say my wish is not to put all the hopes on this, but to make sure that we work continuously and that we make a difference every day. And from that perspective, I just wish that we all meet our targets.
For me, definitely having more and more companies committed to the SBTi, validating their targets, also having a truly global presence. So financial institutions also have this power of driving action globally. So being from the Latin American, from the global south, I really wish we have more companies in the region committing. So I give you here this call to action, like let's commit, let's make this a really truly global initiative.
You can have 3.
Yeah.
Maybe no, but I have three wishes, reflections. I mean, the first one is not to lose track of this long-term challenge that we have, given all the short-term challenges that we have in the world, which tend to take a lot of bandwidth from any of us, actually. And I think we shouldn't lose track, and my wish is that we don't lose track of this massive long-term challenge, which is becoming actually closer and closer, right? That's number one. Number two, I think I would wish actually that we increased even further the collaborative spirit in this challenge. COP, we always have, this is my, nth COP. The whole world comes together, but we discuss, sometimes I still see bickering, I still see blaming, I still see, and I really would wish that we got away with that and just worked at it much more together in all dimensions, across value chains, across geographies, across technologies. So that's my second wish. And my third wish is not to get stuck in details. Sometimes we discuss data, transparency, we like this, we like that, and by that, we use it almost as an excuse for action. Climate change is an order of magnitude challenge. It's not about the 2-3%. We need to cut emissions by 90%, 100%. So we know the direction, so let's just do it. Don't get stuck in the little details.
Thanks, Luca. Now I just got intrigued that I want to have Markus to reflect again on these wishes. And what is your wish? You are representing, of course, the youth here.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. I think my wishes will be that that maybe the hands won't get dirty, but the hands will get clean. I think that the company is very fast, and these economic streams will go to the clean energy and will go to companies that are working for a green transition, so we can end and see that that companies actually are working towards a better future, both for the ones living and the ones that are coming. So that will be my end hope, that the hands will get clean.
Thank you very much. I hope that the hands will get clean. So thank you, audience. Thank you, panel. And with these wishes, I think I can conclude that now the NIB's new climate strategy has been officially launched. Thank you very much.